On today's podcast, we have Rhys Jessop. He's a former Florida Panthers scout, and he's had a very interesting trip up the ladder and soon to be back in the NHL, currently a free agent. But also like to make a shout out to our sponsor, Easy Crease. Be kind to your goalies, give them a crease. Check them out, Easy Crease. Dan, what'd you take away?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I had never spoken with him directly. We've interacted on Twitter before, and he's a great follow while he's in the public sphere for now, like you said. I've always really admired him. This is a guy who started at Canucks Army. That was my foray into his work, and that's a blog that has really produced a lot of NHL quality people. They've been kind of like a feeder for the NHL, and in my own writing for the Blue Jackets blog, First Ohio Battery, we definitely tried to emulate what Canucks Army started. So it was pretty cool to get to chat with him.
I really enjoyed how much he talked about context, everything being within context. You're looking for the best players, but how do you weed out, someone playing in the BC versus the O, wherever they're going to be, and figuring out, who truly drives a player and who's going to have value at the next level. So that was cool. And then just his drive to continue to learn. And I also love the fact that he is a subscriber to the Hockey IQ newsletter. I mean, what's more to love than that?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. Without further ado, our episode with Rhys. Welcome, Rhys. Great to have you on the Hockey IQ podcast. I'm excited for this one. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. I'm also really excited to be talking to you guys. Thank you to you and Dan for having me.
Yeah, super excited. I mean, you've got a very interesting background of how you've kind of come into this, and then being around the Florida Panthers for a bit, you got to see some interesting stuff, which I know we won't be able to talk about all of it, but give the listeners a little bit of that. I think they'll very much appreciate it. But maybe a quick background from you on your story.
Yeah. I actually have a background in business. I have a business degree from UBC, and I kind of got into this almost by accident because you're going to university, you think you're going to have a career in whatever you're getting your degree in. But while I was there, I started sports writing. I started writing for Canucks Army, which is a blog that covers the Vancouver Canucks. And while I was there, one of the things that we collectively wrote about as the Nhl Entry Draft. Myself and a couple of other individuals did a lot of original research on the draft, looking at it through a more quantitative lens. From that caught the eye of some people in Florida, and we were hired on to kind of augment their amateur scouting department. While I was there, I basically told Dale Talent, hey, I'd like to transition to a more traditional role because, that's why you get into hockey. You get into hockey because you love it. You don't love crunching numbers and thumbing through spreadsheets. You get into it because you like being in the rink. You like watching games. You like all that stuff. So that was kind of something that I wanted to do. And while I was there, I got the opportunity to learn a lot and kind of not only that, but test myself. And I was fortunate enough to be promoted into a scouting role. And yeah, for the last number of years until I left this past January, I was able to be one of the Western scouts for the Florida Panthers.
Rhys, did you grow up in BC? And if so, did you grow up playing hockey? I'm just curious, what your hockey playing experience is.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm from Vancouver, BC, so I've been in the Lower Mainland all my life. Again, basically skating all my life. But my dad played. My mom was a figure skater, so I was skating from the time as soon as I could walk, I was on the ice skating. So I've been playing for my whole life, which is that's about 27 years I've been on the ice now. So hockey is something that's been pretty much a constant for me all through elementary school, high school. I've made some of my best friends through hockey. I love being at the rink, so it's just been a part of my life since day one, basically.
That's awesome. Before we get too far away from it, I kind of want to keep talking about Canucks Army because I think it's so fascinating that this blog became so influential, not just in the hockey analytics space, but also obviously, like you said, people in NHL circles are reading your stuff, and it became almost like a breeding ground for hockey writers, at least in my opinion. It was probably one of, if not the most influential hockey blog for some years there. What do you think you can kind of attribute that success to? Was it just like youthful energy and like everybody's kind of just working on these projects together, or what was it about? What was in the water that led you guys to be so successful?
Shared trauma from 2011, maybe.
People don't forget.
Tom Drance, who's with the Athletic previously, he was a PR guy for the Florida Panthers as well. He's also done stuff for the Score and Sportsnet. He was running Canucks Army at the time that I was brought on, and he always likes to joke that in back-to-back years he had NHL quality crews running his draft analysis, because one year he had Cam Charron and Rob Pettipies, both of whom were later picked up by Kyle Dubas and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then when they left the public sphere, then he had Dmitry Filipovich, who worked for the Calgary Flames for a time. I believe he's still with Sportsnet now. And then he had myself, Cam Lawrence, and Josh Weisbach, who, of course, all three of us went to the Florida Panthers. So and I'm sure I'm forgetting more people too, but in a very kind of brief run of a 3, 4, 5 year span, we had a number of people that we were working with and collaborating together with, that ended up finding their way to the NHL. And I'm not really sure I attribute that to any one thing, with us all being in the one place. I mean, everyone that I worked with, had the pleasure of working with, was obviously incredibly talented. And I think the fact that we were all at Canucks Army might have just been happenstance, because I'm pretty confident that guys like Cam Charron and Cam Lawrence, Josh Weisbach, especially, like those guys are all talented. Like they're really talented. They're really smart. They would have found their way one way or the other. So, but it was definitely a really interesting experience, especially looking back on it now, going like, wow, we had no idea that when we were doing this at the time, that when we were doing some of the iterations of our models and being banned for scraping all these websites and stuff, and running from and this is one of the stories that Josh Weisbach will tell you. He was in a gated community in San Jose on vacation, running from open Wi-Fi to open Wi-Fi to scrape HockeyDB for a project that we were doing, because HockeyDB bans you from scraping. So it would IP ban him, so we'd just move on to the next one. IP ban him, so we'd just move on to the next one. So it's funny looking back on stuff like that and going like, wow, can you believe that like everyone here wound up in the NHL in one capacity or another?
That's wild. Like, I mean, I am so fascinated by this whole thing, because I think that you really inspired like a bunch of team blogs to like try to become more creative. Like, what was the day-to-day culture like? Were you just like, it sounds like you were almost given free reign to take on these big projects at the expense maybe of, the day-to-day minutia, or am I missing the boat there?
There was some push and pull from the top. Certainly that the people at the Nation Network, who are higher ups, they started with Oilers Nation in Edmonton, and the flavor of that blog is certainly a little different, a lot different, actually. So I attribute it a lot to Tom Drance. In another way, like the mainstream media in Vancouver kind of helped it as well. A guy like the late Jason Botchford, was always a big booster of the work that we did at Canucks Army, and the receptiveness of some of the more predominant voices in Vancouver mainstream media made it really easy for us to have kind of this different culture where we were still fans, but we weren't so irreverent that we were like a glorified message board sort of. And there was certainly, because I started as a columnist there, just doing research articles and stuff like that. I later became managing editor, so I ran the site, and there was some kind of push and pull with, hey, we want you guys to do this stuff, and we'd be like, that doesn't fit the tenor of our blog. That's not what our audience wants. So it was a bit of a fight at times, but we had a good thing going there, and we were able to grow viewership and stuff to a degree where we were allowed that a bit more of that free reign and allowed to continue doing what we were doing.
I've been really loving the fact that you guys were able to go on and take a different viewpoint of looking at these prospects, and you just talked about it, about all of the models that you guys use. I know you're using hero rankings, and different things like that, and scraping and all these projects. I'm kind of curious because you've been through it from pretty much the beginning and seen that evolution of the old models to the new models. How are they being used? What's useful about them? What maybe wasn't so great, and how's that changed over time?
This is actually a really interesting question, and something that I don't think gets talked about enough, especially in terms of the applicability of new models or of old models as well. I think the kind of one of the more predominant points that hasn't changed over the course of the years is that every model that's being built has been based on scoring and points and the factors that we can tease out that have kind of influenced that. We made some innovations at Canucks Army. I know Cam and Josh in particular, when they were able to build PCS, which was the model that they had or revealed publicly. The big kind of innovation there was a model based on comparisons and cohorts. So looking at like comparable players and seeing how they turned out. It was more of it was like a historical cohort analysis based on a number of attributes. The history goes back further than that. A lot of the work that I did that preceded PCS and a lot of the was inspired by guys at Hockey Prospectus back in the early 2000s, guys like Gabe Desjardins, Ian Fife. And they've all the models have been to a certain point scoring models, points models. And that's a pretty important thing to realize when you're looking at the applicability of them and how to use them and how to use these models. Because if you talk to any sort of analyst, contemporary analyst that looks at NHL stuff nowadays, they'll tell you points are a terrible way to judge a player. They don't necessarily correlate year over year with raw offensive ability. They don't tell you anything about defensive or two-way ability. There's a lot of things like contextual factors that influence them. So when you're dealing with prospect models, you are dealing with that reality. But at the same time, you go back, you test them, and this was one of the first things we tested with one of our experiments, is that we found that a pretty simple heuristic can perform at least comparable to about a third of the NHL, like indistinguishable for that. So if there was no value in numbers, you wouldn't be able to take basically unfiltered raw points and perform to a level of a lot of the league. And when we started layering like more complex quantitative measures on top of that, it got better and better. So we know that there's value in them, but we also know that how they're applicable has to be accounted for in certain ways. You have to realize what the limitations are. So when you're looking at prospects in particular, like, okay, we don't know from points, we don't know anything about their two-way games. We don't know about like translatable skills. We don't know about platform skills. We can't really, what we can say are these things, and we can do a market analysis, and we know historically what the trends are and stuff like that. So it's all really valuable information. It's all things you need to know to make a proper educated decision. But there's also a place for it and a way to use it. And if you don't understand how to use it, then you're not going to maximize the value you get out of that. And you're also not going to maximize the value you get out from your other information gathering exercises.
I'm curious on what those added layers look like on top of these models. Obviously, it's based on scoring, but then what are people doing? What is so valuable that people have gone beyond and into?
I think a lot of the stuff that's added on, those extra layers, there are a lot of contextual factors, because you're trying to kind of, when you're looking at scoring, you're kind of trying to tease out, okay, how good is this player as an individual, and how do we get that from this number here? So you're looking at things like, if a guy's more physically mature, he should score more against less physically mature guys. You can account for that with age to a degree. If a guy is in a league that has absolutely no goaltending, that matters with regards to how many points that they'll get at the end of the year. What are their teammates like? How much do they play? What opportunities do they get? Are they playing at power play? Are they playing 5-on-5? Historically, what level does this player have to be scoring at this league to have a good chance of playing in the NHL? So you're going back and you're doing a long-term analysis on like league strength and stuff like that. And you're trying to account for factors as well, because with scoring, certain scoring numbers you can begin estimating things like time on ice, and then you can begin looking at like offensive efficiency and stuff like that. So it's just layering on kind of like context in order to account for the factors that are important in influencing what you see in the raw counts. Because once you are able to do that, then you're more able to really start drawing really strong conclusions from your analyses.
I don't want to put you into a bind here, so I'll leave this question vague on purpose. How have your scouting philosophies changed over time?
In terms of philosophies, I think the broad overall philosophy hasn't actually changed that much. The way that I've always kind of seen it is you are trying to find the best hockey player, a pretty kind of straightforward guiding principle. So everything you're doing that is looking at, okay, what guy here do I think is going to be the best hockey player, and why do I think that? In terms of the actual
the best?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
I feel like we need that little piece there.
Yeah,
Cut them off.
Yeah, and that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And it's a lot of it has been just kind of learning about just like a lot of technical stuff. It's just how you get good at anything. Just learn technical stuff, and then the rest kind of follows. So it's learning in terms of like, okay, what's a good skating stride? Like what's if there's two guys that are bad skaters, what separates a guy that's fixable from a guy that's not fixable? What's good decision making? What's good hockey sense? What is good stick handling technique? And once you begin layering all that on and on the philosophies in terms of, okay, what guy's just the best player, then you can really start making a framework, I think, of scouting. I've always kind of tended to because I think one of the misnomers with analytics is like, oh, they prefer the soft skill player, and personally I've never been a big fan of the soft skill player. So it's actually probably done less for me in terms of changing my my outlook than some people might think. Like one my favorite player for the Vancouver, like I was a big Vancouver Giants fan growing up. My favorite Vancouver Giant of all time was, or my favorite two Giants of all time were Milan Lucic and Brendan Gallagher. And I don't think, sure, they're both pretty skilled guys, but I don't think you could classify either of them as soft. So there's always a bit of that in terms of guys that and players that I'm looking for. So I'm not sure if philosophies have changed over time as much as just the ability to do the job has.
Where do you like to get your ideas? How do you learn your technicals? I know a lot of people out there listening in are wondering about the technical side of it. How did you improve your technicals? Would be my first question. Maybe even before that is maybe how do you go about identifying hockey IQ and that hockey sense?
Well, before that, well, not before that. Well, we'll get into the hockey IQ and hockey sense one first, because I do have an answer that I want to talk about for this one. Is that I look at hockey sense and I kind of break it down into two main areas: problem solving and creativity. I look at problem solving as the ability to take a puck from a highly contested traffic area and gain time and space with it. I look at creativity as the kind of opposite of that, is take a puck from a low pressure area into a highly contested danger area. So you're doing a lot of problem solving on defense, and you have to be creative to manufacture offense. It's like how do you get pucks to the front of the net versus how do you prevent people from getting there. So that's kind of how I look at that, and I really have valued guys that have good problem solving and just doing things on the ice that lead to keeping pucks out of high danger areas on defense. Like for example, when I looked at John Ludwig, he was Florida's 3rd overall pick. We got him a couple years ago, a little off the board. He was a re-entry defenseman with like 18 points in 50 something games, so not exactly an analytics darling. But when you went in and you watched him, you looked at the things that he did on the ice, and you thought about what like contemporary analysis would say about that sort of player in the NHL, in terms of, okay, he denied ice really well in the defensive end, so he kept guys out of the slot. When he had the puck on the stick in the defensive zone, he was really good at making that 10-20 foot pass to a guy out of pressure. He had really good two zone vision. He could put pucks on the tape of guys streaking across the far offensive blue line. So you're looking at those little things, and you're like, yeah, check. So to me, just kind of going through the little things like that, that's what good hockey sense is to me. The ability to work pucks away from pressure when you're on defense, and the ability to work pucks into pressure when you're trying to attack and manufacture offense. As far as learning about the technical side, I really can't say that there's there's one definitive source. It's just kind of a continuous process of reading the little snippets you can here and there, and just building on what you know and adding just like little things to your toolkit. I've talked to a bunch of skating coaches. We had the good fortune in Florida. One of the other guys in the Western beat, Evan Marble, is a power skating instructor out of Kamloops. So I was able to learn a lot from him. And you just read. I've read stuff on Coach's site. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, read articles on the internet, and just taking bits and pieces from everywhere to kind of add that to the repertoire in terms of what I know and how you can apply it.
And there's no better way to find out about these little bit of snippets than the Hockey IQ newsletter.
Wow, you are shameless.
I know Rhys was already talking about puck acquisition, how great of an article that one was about finding ways to elongate passing options. So he's on board already. I think the rest of our listeners need to go and subscribe.
There was a fantastic one recently about how saucer passes are overrated. I mean, really, that article was more about how like slip and hook passes are underrated. But anyways,
those can
subscribe to the newsletter.
Yeah, thank you. There you go. I'm curious, we were talking offline before this started a little bit about the BCHL and the complications that, maybe not complications, but just the difference between scouting Junior A versus the CHL. So maybe just start there with your experiences, and then I kind of want to dive in a little bit, but I'll let you start like at the top.
Yeah, for sure. The touchstone of this, and just to like completely rip the Band-Aid off for our listeners, because this is going to come out later. We're the World Juniors is on right now. Canada, Russia. Alex Newhook scored, and Daniel and I were talking about when in Newhook's draft year, because I saw a lot of him with the Victoria Grizzlies. Yeah. We ended up taking one of his teammates, Carter Berger, in the fourth round that year. Another re-entry defenseman in the BCHL. And Alex Campbell, I believe he went in the early third round to Nashville, was also on that team. So 3 NHL prospects on one BCHL team. And that's a rarity. That doesn't happen. I mean, it's probably happened at some other point, but I can't particularly recall in Junior A when that's happened. Because Junior A is a very interesting league in terms of how it compares to the BC or to the CHL. First of all, the quality of competition is just lower. Guys that star in the BCHL are usually bottom 6 guys in the WHL. A good example of that was there is a player, Holden Katsale, big power forward type for the Surrey Eagles last year. He's one of the league scoring leaders. Went to the Vancouver Giants, and he was a role player. He's this here. That's a pretty easy barometer. And now, because that was within the same season, it's not like he was one league 1 year the next. It's a couple weeks apart. But on the other hand, it's also a much older league than the WHL as well, because you're allowed, I believe, 6 20-year-olds on your roster rather than just 3. So it skews a lot older. And there's also the matter of you get a lot of kids from American high school that are using it as a stopover year until the NCAA. So when you're drafting out of that league, you also have to consider that the long-term projection on these guys is like, well, you don't have to sign them to an ELC right away. They can go 3-4 years in the NCAA, develop. You can put them there, see how it goes. You're not forced into a decision on them as quickly as you would be on a CHL player. So there's a lot of just different little factors that make it just a little different scouting Junior A than the WHL, and there's some quality prospects that come out of there for sure. But if you're not kind of cognizant of all the little things at play, like, because one of the big things, like for example, when you're talking about a BCHLer, one of the big considerations is where's he going to school? Where is he committed? Because if there's a guy committed to a crap program, you're going, oh no, that's going to be like 3-4 development years wasted. Do we really want that, or do we want the guy that's like guaranteed to go to NODAC or something? But then you get the guy that has a commitment to NODAC. Maybe he's playing like 3rd, 4th line minutes there. So that next step being out of your control is just another little consideration. So it's definitely an interesting challenge with all those little factors at play.
I'm a big fan of the BC. I feel like that league is way underrated. So I guess I'm going to segue this to, how do you kind of watch a game and study hockey itself? I know a lot of people, if they're doing it for, say, I'm scouting and I'm looking at a player, but like, how do you kind of just study the game in general, picking up these technical stuff, and when you're doing your own research or you're trying to understand the game better?
Watching a game from a more breaking down the game perspective, in terms of that, and scouting a game can be kind of different, and even scouting a game throughout the year changes as well, because early in the year you kind of go through a couple phases. You kind of go through like a discovery phase and then a focus phase near the end of the season. Early in the year, there's a lot of guys that you're either not familiar with or you haven't seen in a bunch of calendar months, so they might have made significant progress year over year. So you spend a lot of time early in the season kind of casting a wide net, looking at some guys on more of a surface level. Of course, still trying to be detailed and be thorough so you don't miss anything. But you're looking at more players at the start of the year and just like, okay, who's impressing me? You're looking for positives. You're looking for positives at the start. Just like do something that puts yourself on my radar. If it's a smart defensive play, if it's a good move in tight one-on-one, if it's a nice pass, if it's a good back check to like hustle to break up something on the back check, if it's a big hit, like just something, put yourself on the radar. So that's kind of how it starts in the year. And then when you get further on, you can kind of key in on one or two guys, or maybe more than that. But you can cue in on fewer guys to a higher degree. So at that point, you're starting to get a holistic picture of their game. You're trying to, I don't want to say poke holes, but you're trying to find everything they're good at, everything they're not good at. That's when you want to do the real detailed breakdowns. I found that in terms of technical ability stuff, and especially for skating strides, video is actually very valuable for this, because you can stop, pause, replay like just a neutral zone skating sequence like 40 times. You can look, okay, where's his balance point? Is he collapsing it at the hips? What's his ankle flexion like? How's his extension? How's his recoveries? And kind of get a sense in that detail. You can, if a guy shoots the puck and scores, okay, how is he rolling his wrists? Is his top arm, is it loose from his body, or is it stapled to his hip? So those are things that you can get into as you watch more and more, and those are kind of the little technical things that you're looking at when you're looking at those guys later in the season.
That makes a ton of sense. And you just stole a question right from me. I was going to ask you about video scouting and if there's any advantages that you see to it. And you just mentioned like being able to kind of go back and rewatch neutral zone plays or shooting or anything really. But I think that just like in this era that we're living in right now and in this time, like what have been your observations about how the hockey community at large has kind of adopted video scouting? Do you think that there's going to be more of a presence down the road 5-10 years? Like where do you see this going? And aside from what you had already said, is there anything else maybe that comes to mind about video scouting that's particularly valuable?
And then on the flip side, I know Buffalo back in the day, they pretty much almost went directly to only video scouting and left the rinks a little bit. What would be the value of in person?
I'll start on the in-person side first. Is that one of the things that I noticed that a lot of people are moving to is ISO footage. I know that there's a lot of firms out there now that are providing ISO footage of players. And the danger with that is that it gives you a very myopic viewpoint on one player, because it's basically stripping all the game context and all the and all the other player context from that viewing, and just having you focus on one guy. And of course, at the end of the day, the exercise of the entry draft isn't just like focusing on one guy. It's gauging a guy relative to everyone else in the draft. When you're just on video, you risk losing a lot of the contextual stuff in terms of what's going on in the game, what's going on in on the ice, like what's happening away from where the camera's focused. So there's a lot of value in being able to see beyond just what's on video there. And there's also value in just being in rinks as well. There's value in going there and talking to coaches, talking to the players and stuff like that. Just being around and listening to kind of keeping your nose to the ground as it were. In terms of video, first of all, the big advantage of video is efficiency. If I have to do a game in Prince George and then get back to Victoria the next day, like that's you're wasting whole days traveling when you're on the road. It's expensive, it's time consuming. It's just, yeah, the live viewing is valuable, but at the same time, and you do have to get to some of these places to see the kids play on home ice versus if you're just watching them on the road, because there is the difference of being in your own bed and or going in someone's barn at the end of a long road trip. So there's the difference there. But video enables you just to do, like, if you have an ISO cam on a guy, that's 18 minutes of video. You can sit down at your computer, open it up, pause, replay, take notes, take detailed notes, screenshot, diagram, clip it, send it to someone else to say, hey, what do you think of this play right here? You can do that. You can do, like, knock out 5 or 6 of those on key guys in the span of one live viewing, and that's before you even take into account, like, the time you save just traveling and getting to places.
Going back a little bit, I want to go back to your Vancouver Giants days. I know you said you developed, implemented, and executed comprehensive program to track and report player performance based on a variety of metrics. So I'm curious how you improved and increased the amount of information at the disposal of the organization, whether it be coaches, management, and really assisting in developing and making those decisions regarding the player personnel.
I see you found my LinkedIn page.
We're well researched here.
I mean, isn't that like the third result on Google search? So
I don't know. I go to about page 7, and then I'm like, all right, I think I've had enough.
Man, is the next question going to be about my science fair performance in 6th grade? Jesus.
Dude, you shouldn't have had that cup of dirt as your project, okay? Just a cup with dirt in it.
I mean, the scary part is that the 6th grade science project was about diffusion across surfaces and, like, water distillation. So I did have a cup of dirt with the project. So that is weird.
He did research, yeah.
But yeah, the Vancouver Giants, that was an interesting opportunity with them, because a lot of that was like, we kind of want to get, like, a second, or like kind of more of an objective set of eyes on some of the stuff that we're doing here. So a lot of that was tracking stuff, compiling reports, just like manual tracking and like compiling reports and saying, like, hey, this is what this means, this is what this means, this is what this means, and just kind of taking it into account. Like, so I remember one of the main things that we did was at training camp, Lorne Malkin didn't think Tyroning was shooting the puck enough. So we sat down and said, hey, this is where you are with, or actually no, it wasn't, he wasn't shooting the puck enough. He wasn't getting in between the dots to shoot enough. It's like, hey, this is how many shot attempts you have. This is how many are actually coming from dangerous areas. If you look at your proportion of this and this, you're here on the team and it's not even the end of training camp yet. You got to be doing a better job of getting in between the dots and getting to the net, because even though you're getting, like, this many shots, you're making it easy on goalies. So just having something like that for some of the players to to illustrate like right then and there, because when you have that evidence, it's like, oh yeah, I get it, like it clicks then. So yeah, it was a lot of stuff like that, just kind of having little numbers to kind of augment the information internally. So it was a lot of just manual work and writing reports.
Was there anything that was extremely important beyond the individuals, like lineup construction, things along those lines?
Not so much. Lauren Mollican was our coach at the time, and Lauren is a real old school guy, and he had final say over the lineups. So it was a lot of helping him with kind of framing things and like if his intuitions were correct or not, and what I was, or what the numbers were saying. So in terms of lineup decisions, it wasn't there was some things here and there. This was a while ago, so I don't remember any specifics, but yeah, it was mostly on the helping him kind of explain things to player side, and helping the GM Scott Bonner just have a better sense of what his how his team was performing.
This is a kind of a random one, but is there a team or a player that stands out for you that you really enjoyed scouting, or kind of is memorable to you all these years later?
I mean, the one that's going to stand out, and I've already mentioned him this interview, is John Ludwig. He was the first guy that based on reports that I'd wrote, was we drafted into the NHL, and it was a lot of fun because it's one of those good scouting stories, because it's like a 2-year chase, because we drafted him as a re-entry player. But I remember going down to the Everett Silvertips preseason tournament, and he was I don't think he was drafted by them. I think he was listed. He was just this listed defenseman out of the, I believe it was KIJHL or something. He played his 16-year-old season in like junior B, and he was like a point per game player there. And I remember watching him with the offensive blue line, like pump fake a guy, take it to the backhand, cut in, and have a scoring chance from the blue line. I'm like, who is this guy? And then I remember him being just the nastiest piece of work in the entire camp as well. Like there was not a back of someone's legs that he wasn't going to slash that camp. So I remember just watching him and being like, and because I didn't have a visa that season, so I couldn't go down to the States to watch games, because I was just like the BC regional scout that year. So I'd have to catch him every once in a while when he came up through Vancouver, and he showed some progression. Like he showed some of that stuff, but not as effective as I'd seen him. And it was like preseason when I saw him the first time, so I was like, okay, this, like there's something here. I'm gonna just put a pin in this guy and keep watching him, because I'm not confident right now. And he's playing as like the 7-8 defenseman in Portland, and like, am I really gonna bang the table for like a number 7, number 8 WHL guy at 17? But then you talk to Mike Johnston, and he's like, yeah, he's going to be our captain next year. He had an increasing role throughout the season, and they just loved him. His dad, Jan Ludwig, is a scout for the Bruins, and like you hear some of the stories, like, yeah, we don't have cable or internet at our place in Kamloops, so Johnny just goes out to the barn and works out like Rocky. Yeah, he's over in the Czech Republic training with like the extra Liga teams and stuff like that. So it's like you're following up on this guy, and you're like, okay, am I falling in love with the deal here? Is there actually a good hockey player? So there's a lot of that goes into play, because you don't want to just be fooled by a good story, because like that's how you get taken in, that's how you make bad decisions. But that whole process of going through that for the 2 years, and it got to the point in his +1 season where he was like a top pairing defenseman for the Winterhawks. He was their number 1 matchup guy. He was first unit penalty kill, first pair at even strength, like defensive zone specialist, great puck mover, that we just sat there and we said, we think he's worth this. Like we're looking at there in the 3rd round. We had a lot of wing prospects available. We also really liked Adam Beckman that year. But we had a ton of guys coming on the wing, so it's like we need a defenseman. So at that point, I just felt confident going like, if you want a defenseman, this is your guy. So that whole 2-year process is the one that sticks out to me, because it wasn't just like the first guy, but it was a good scouting story too, to to say the least.
And I'm assuming you had to be crapping your pants a little bit. Like, okay, what's wrong with this kid that Boston hasn't taken him yet when his dad's right there?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that too. Like we thought that that other teams were really interested in him as well. So we knew that there was a other NHL interest. So that helped us feel a little reassured. And also, we got absolutely glowing reports on him from his coach in Portland. Like Mike Johnston was just like he named him the captain. He's like, yeah, this he's absolutely dialed in. Like he's going to be one of the best defensemen in the league. So we were confident based on what we'd seen, the work that we'd done, that even though the team that employed his dad didn't really bother us, because we were pretty confident in the work we did and the homework we did.
Yeah, I'm looking at his elite prospects page right now. His draft plus 1 year, he had 17, 45, 62, and 60 games. So over a point a game as a defenseman, as a 19-year-old. I guess the natural follow-up here is, this is like a story with a happy ending. Like, what's it like to be on the other side where you follow a kid for or not just a kid, like, a region for you, for months, years. And then when it comes to the draft, either like the pick gets traded or they go another direction. And like, obviously maybe the fit wasn't right, but you have to have some sort of like vested interest. I've always been super curious. Like, you don't have to speak in specifics. I know you can anyway, but like, what's it like being on the other side? This is like your livelihood, obviously. And part of your reputation is like getting your guys, or, you know what I'm saying? Like it's obviously complicated, but what's it like being on the other side of this?
I mean, the short answer is it sucks, but the longer answer is part of the job, like a major part of the job, is saying no. And
right.
if you can't, if you try and force it and you can't say no, you are potentially more dangerous to your team and organization than if you say if you can say no. Because if you can't say no and you're always pushing for guys, well, then you're advocating for your employer to invest valuable development resources on players that you deep down know are not worth it. So there have been times when I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's 7 guys in this region. And other than that, like once we get past like guy 6 or guy 7, who will be gone in like round 3, maybe.
Yeah, my job here is done.
Don't even come back to me, because I'm telling you right now, like it's just not worth it.
Wow. Yeah.
So even though you'd love to come to the table with guys every single year and say, yeah, this guy's going to be a star, this guy's going to be a star, this guy's going to be great, and have like just hit after hit after hit after hit, the reality of the situation is it just isn't like that. Like that's just not how drafting and player development has worked historically. So being able to turn around and say like, no, sorry guys, there's just no one. Like that's, and you have to be able to trust like the rest of your staff that everyone's going to be doing that as well. Everyone there should be pulling on the same rope. Everyone there should be aligned in your incentives to make the team as good as you possibly can, so that even though it's good for your reputation or whatever, your reputation should be founded on how the team does at the draft table, not just the guys that you get from your region. Because otherwise you're going to make you're going to make unforced errors, and that's really something that you just want to eliminate as much as you can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, as you know, obviously, like the WHL's had some up and down draft years. I'm not going to pretend to know how this upcoming one is, although I know Lambos is a stud and he'll go early. But that's super interesting. I guess I've never really like thought a ton about it, and just hearing that was pretty insightful. So thanks for that. Greg, you got anything else?
Yeah, I got one last one for you here. So let's talk about your career path here. So, been a great one. I know you're active on Twitter right now, and I'm assuming that probably isn't going to last forever. I would assume you've got some NHL teams probably sniffing around you. So, what are you looking for in your next position? What's going to be a good fit for you? What do you want to look for in teams that really make it a good spot for you?
I mean, obviously, I want to get back in the NHL first and foremost. That's I think that's a pretty easy assumption to make. And I've been fortunate enough to talk to a couple teams here in my downtime. I'm really hoping for just kind of a good fit that's kind of more philosophically aligned with what I like doing in terms of this, like everyone pulling on the same rope, everyone looking for certain things, being aligned in how we look at players. Just like some kind of cohesion and probably a little more progressive too in terms of how the job should be done and the overall philosophies at the drafting table and stuff. Because like what a team values and how they value players can change from team to team, and that honestly dictates how you do your job. So something like that would be nice. But at the end of the day, like I'm a competitor. I don't like being on the sidelines. I like being in the fight. I like being in the rink. So we'll see what comes along, and no matter what happens, I'm confident that I'll make the best of it.
That's wonderful. So following up on that, is there an NHL team that goes more towards what you value, just based on what they've picked here in the last few years? Or, what is a team that you're drafting? What does it look like? What are you valuing?
For me, I look at how drafts play into like a team's overall player acquisition strategy. And I think that the teams that I really appreciate in terms of how they draft are the ones that go for upside, because the ability to fill a roster spot is one thing, but filling a roster spot with a valuable player is another. If you find one second, like long-term second line forward, like how many second line forwards are traded for like 4 fourth line forwards in the NHL? Like you just don't see that. You want, when it's a second line forward, it's like you want like picks with upside or something, or a prospect or something with upside that you hope can one day replace that second line forward. So when you're at the draft table, you should be thinking along those terms as well. Like, okay, if we get one guy that has like second line upside, he's more valuable than 4 guys that will be fourth liners. So the teams that I really appreciate are the teams that have kind of done that for the last number of years. Teams that really kind of go and say, you know what, we know that this guy is quote unquote high risk, high reward, but that reward is good enough that we're willing to take on that risk because we're confident we can find those lower risk, lower reward guys elsewhere.
So we're talking teams like Carolina and or more teams like maybe Montreal.
I've been quite a fan of what Carolina's done the last couple of years. They hired one of my friends, Cody Nicollet, a number of years ago, and he's been working the Western beat for them. I know they got a couple guys from his region there this past year. I really like the Seth Jarvis pick, and even Ronan Seeley in round 7 for what he is. That was really good value on him. So yeah, the Hurricanes I think have done a good job of that, and based on who I know they have in that organization, they're really strong out west and throughout the world. Actually, they got good European scouting. I know that their director of scouting, Darren York's very highly thought of throughout the industry. So I'm confident that they'll be able to continue drafting well going forward here.
Well, talking about European scouting, let's talk about 2 teams that have taken a lot of Europeans here recently: the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So let's hear what you got on CBJ here, especially with that swing of a first-round pick they just took, and then probably the most popular team in the NHL and potentially most progressive.
CBJ is interesting. I never know much about the guys that CBJ takes out of Europe because of course my focus is in Western Canada, and the swing on Chinikov was especially or particularly an interesting one. Jarmo Kekalainen's staff has never been afraid to make ballsy calls at the draft table. I know back in the day, like the Dubois over Puljujarvi was like, oh wow, how are they doing? But they look great on that in retrospect. So like I probably wouldn't go with some of the big swings that they take, in the draft. Like Chinikov wouldn't have been a guy that I would have probably looked at in that position, but at the same time, they've earned some with finding guys like Nudavara and Bemstrom and stuff like that, like guys that can just like Gavrikov that can kind of step in and just fill roles in an NHL roster. A pretty solid job of finding what they need, especially to when they've lost so much over the years through free agency and stuff. So when you're at the draft table sometimes and you look over and see what they're doing, it's like, okay, that's interesting. But yeah, and Toronto is always interesting. Much like Carolina, they've made some really interesting and progressive calls. I liked the Amirov pick this past year. I saw him a couple of years ago at the World Junior A Challenge when Russia brought that team the team over featuring him, and he was really good there. They like trading down and taking upside. And I'm a fan of Wes Clark as well. He was previously with Florida. I worked with him for a couple of years before he was promoted in Toronto. So I know that kind of the type of players that he likes, and he was another one. He was another one of the guys that kind of had an influence on me in terms of learning the craft. It's interesting seeing guys like Topi Niemela, who's having a great World Juniors here, and just watching him and just going like, yeah, that's a Wes Clark defenseman right there. That's a guy that moves in the pocket well. He active feet at the offensive blue line. Like even going back to the Sioux days when him and Kyle Dubas were in the Sioux, seeing the defenseman that came through there in that era, it's like it's pretty. You can see a trend. Let's say so. It's fun to watch the Leafs draft as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation here. Open to any book recommendations, and then 2 minutes on the floor to talk about anything or plug anything you want.
I'm a little embarrassed to say I'm not much of a book reader these days. I'm trying to work my way through Ryan Stimson's book, Tape to Space.
It's good. I read it over quarantine. Yep.
Yeah, it's Ryan's a bright guy, and he's a good guy too. I've met him at a couple of the conferences and stuff. So he's always a pleasure to talk to. So I'm working my way through that, and I'm enjoying it as well. I guess follow me on Twitter at @that's_offside. And before I go, just a shout out to my friend Tyler Horsfall. He's been going through some medical problems recently, scheduled for surgery tomorrow. So by the time this comes out, hopefully you're all good, man, and looking forward to seeing you back in top shape.
All the best to Tyler. Rhys, can't thank you enough for coming on. We talked for almost an hour, but we barely scratched the surface. So hopefully, best of luck with everything in the near future. And whether you're scooped up by another NHL franchise or not, we hope to stay in touch with you. So best of luck down the line, and thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. This has been a great time. Had a blast coming on here with you.
Thank you for tuning into the Hockey IQ podcast. We are Hockey's Arsenal. Greg Revak and Dan Dukart. Together, we've come together to create a platform and a community to expand on hockey intelligence, hockey IQ, whatever you want to call it. We're very passionate about seeing this game played smarter and better, and continue to develop itself to the next level and staying on the cutting edge of things. So you can find us at Hockey's Arsenal on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We're also at hockeysarsenal.com. From there, you can find some resources and some options to work with us. We're excited to continue this. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, follow, and share. You can also join up for our newsletter as well, where we're going to tackle anything Hockey IQ related. So we're excited to have everyone here and continue to build.